Hey guys, TKC here, TheKaijudoChannel, with the second video of the Dragon Strike Infinite set review. So of course, because we did the Light Civilization last week, we're going to dive straight into the Water Civilization, starting with the very first super rare, and that is Issel of the Frozen Wastes. So personally, I don't feel like this card is very amazing at all. It is the only level 8 out of the super rare dragons, and probably for a good reason. It doesn't really do as much as the other dragons do. The effect is really cool, and it could be quite devastating at times, but I personally have probably never ever seen the effect actually go off and be really useful. The fact that you have to have it tapped to keep their creatures tapped is very, it's very restricting. It's very, hard to get that set up. Of course, cards like Stormspark Blast or just tap in general makes this a little bit easier, I guess. But, I don't know, I just really don't ever see the dream situation where they're stuck with a bunch of creatures tapped and then you attack one of their creatures with the Issel and then everything stays tapped. I don't know, it's just something I've never ever seen happen. I don't know, I just think it's a very rare and kind of very fragile setup, and for that reason, I'm going to give Issel a 2.5. It's definitely not as amazing as the other dragons, and I feel that it's not really a good card on its own to be worth a 3 or more. Alright, so now let's get into one of my favorite cards of the set, Bottle of Wishes. Now, this is probably the other card besides Andromeda of the Citadel that's been quite controversial in the Kaijudo community. A lot of people say it's so amazing, it's too good, and a lot of people are saying, wow, this card is absolutely terrible. And I'm kind of in the middle, because this card definitely has tons of potential. Now, because you can only run 3 copies of Bottle of Wishes, it's definitely not the most consistent thing ever. So if we get more cards like Bottle of Wishes that are kind of like cheap and easier to play, perhaps Bottle of Wishes will shine a lot more. Right now, it's more of like a lucky, gimmicky kind of thing, and I could definitely agree with that. It's not, the most amazing card. You could build decks that are favorable for Bottle of Wishes, but Bottle of Wishes isn't making your decks, super duper amazing. So, for that reason, I'm going to give it a 3.5, because it definitely has tons of potential. Right now, I don't think it really has a place in the meta, unless, some crazy awesome bottle deck comes out. I did post a bottle deck recently, but even then, I kind of have my doubts on it. I don't feel like it's really amazing. I just think it's, very neat, and I think it could kind of combat a lot of the decks. I think for now, Bottle of Wishes is really good at a 3.5, and I feel that later on in the game, it could easily be a 4, because the card might actually be really good. Alright, next on the list is Coral Claw. This is a very interesting blocker. It's a blocker that draws you a card once it gets banished, so that's kind of neat. I've seen some interesting implications of this card, kind of comboing it with Darkness to bring it back with Return from Beyond or Dracothane and stuff like that, but I just think there are a lot more better options in the blocker area. With cards like Scarador, Gloom Hollow, Canyon Skimmer, Star Lantern, and things like that, I really do not see the point of using Coral Claw. The draw is kind of neat, but it is a level 4 card. You might as well just play Logo Scan and draw 2. It just is way better. You could just play Nyx and play Dragons for days and draw cards. So, Coral Claw I think is kind of weak in that respect. It's also only 3,000 power on a level 4, which you could easily do with a level 2 if you wanted to, like Refi. So I'm going to give Coral Claw a 1.5 because it's definitely not the worst card I've ever seen. I guess drawing a card is kind of neat that it replaces itself, but it's an irrelevant race and it just isn't as good as other blockers out there. Now the next card is very awesome. It is Dragon of Reflections, level 7, 7,000. It's really awesome that you can set shields down with this. Dragon of Reflections, you can actually look at the shield you take first and then put a card in your hand and put it back. So if you do get a really good shield blast out of there, you could simply shuffle your hand and then go, oh, I'm going to put this back, but they have no idea. They just think it's like, oh, you just set up a new card or whatever, but in reality you just kind of took it and put it back. Dragon Reflections is, just really nice to set up amazing shield blasts like Stormspark Blast and Terror Pit, and it also has a decent body. 7,000 is nothing to laugh at, especially on a level 7, so it could trade really well with those pesky Saberbolt cards. and it could beat down Tatsurions easily. Because you do not have to use Dragon Reflections in a dragon-centric deck, this easily gets a 4, because it could also go into like Light Water Dark control decks, whether it's Dragon or Cobalt control. It definitely has a place right now. It's definitely doing a lot of work, I think, and yeah, definitely a mainstay in the format right now. Now, the next card is Emperor Dendrite. Very interesting card. It's basically an upgrade to Blurple. Blurple didn't really get too much out of this set, but it did get Emperor Dendrite, which could be used to replace cards like, I guess, Dark Scaradorable or even King Neptus, because Emperor Dendrite is basically a kind of like a little bit weaker Rusalka mixed with the double breaker that Dark Scaradorable provides. So it's definitely really awesome to have in the deck. However, that's kind of like one of the few decks I could actually see it being used in. I guess it could also be used in like a Fire Water Ag Rush kind of thing. But I don't know. Level 5 is kind of steep for a cost in those kinds of decks. But it's definitely really good. I'm going to give it a 3, no doubt. Only going to give it a 3 basically because it's kind of limited in what decks you use it in, but it's definitely a great card, and that's why it's at least a 3. And the next card is Eye of the Tides. That's going to be getting a 1. Moving on, next card. That card being Kendricks the Psionic. Very, very interesting card. Now, this card, I believe, had a decent amount of hype. It was basically a way more powerful Neuron, I guess. Not more powerful as in a better card than Neuron, but more powerful as in it just has better stats and draws you more cards and stuff like that. It has double breaker. The main drawback of this is that there really isn't the best bait for this card right now. Of course, there are tons of level 5 dragons out there, and they're even cheaper with the birds. You know, like you could evolve it on top of Herald after it did its job and stuff like that. Making a Kendrick-centric deck is probably something that doesn't really work right now, but maybe in the future we'll be getting some better dragon bait for Kendricks. Probably not level 4 ones, but I don't want to speak too early, so I'm going to give Kendricks a 3.5. Because I definitely see it in a lot of different decks. It's very splashable right now. It's not really a mainstay card as of like a 2 of or a 3 of. But it definitely works as a 1 of in certain decks, and so that's why it gets a 3.5. And now the next card is Logos Lookout. Once again, it's nothing really special. It's another Cyberlord at the very least, but there are just way better Cyberlords than this card. Like, we already have Cyber Sprite, we already have Cyber Trader, we already have Aqua Seneschal, and we even have Hydro Spy, which is another option. So I think Logos Lookout is kind of unnecessary. It's just kind of irrelevant compared to all those other Cyberlords I've been talking about. So I'm going to give it a 1. I really don't see the effect to be useful at all. Now, the next card is O Warden. I love the name of this card, considering that I believe there are certain jellyfish out there that are called Mana Wars or whatever. I don't know, it's just an interesting play on words, I guess. But as far as the card itself, after reading it a second time, I honestly don't like the card at all. When I first read it, I actually thought it was, when it gets banished, you search your deck for a Mana Warden and put it on the field. If that was the case, I think it would actually win a lot better. It probably would get like a 2 if that was the case, but it's actually, you need another Mana Warden in your hand. And considering the lowest amount of cards in your deck is 40 and you can only use 3, the odds of that happening are very, very slim. Although it did happen in a draft, I think it was. I think it was a draft in Earth Power's draft. So it definitely could happen, especially if you get more than 1. But in Constructed, it's pretty much terrible. So it definitely gets a 1 out of 5. Alright, the next card is the Water Firebird. It is Nyx. Pretty much the other super awesome Firebird. The way WotC thought about these Firebirds is the fact that Fire and Nature are the 2 best civilizations that use dragons. So for that reason, they made the Fire and Nature birds a little bit less impressive compared to the other 3 civilization Firebirds. Now, Lux, I already talked about it, it's super awesome, it saves your dragons, and now Nyx is super crazy. It draws you a card every time you play a dragon. So it's pretty much a great arena and like an infinite sprout for your dragons. Of course, all the birds have this cost 1 less effect, and they all stack. And, you know, having Nyx, like, basically allowing amazing dragons to come out turn 4 is insane. The most common thing I've been seeing right now is, like, Lux into Nyx into, like, insert any dragon level 5 or 6 next, and then you draw one and it's protected. It's usually either Herald of Infernus or Lyra the Blazing Sun, basically. Those are, like, the two best plays to follow up a Nyx or a Lux Nyx play. And just the constant draw and the constant all your dragons cost one less is just too good to ignore. So for that, it's going to get the same rating as Lux. It's going to be getting a 4 as well, because you can't play it in every single deck. Of course, you got to use it in decks that use dragons. And so for that, it is absolutely amazing. So the second to last card on the list is Queen Tagawa. I've seen a lot of people have trouble saying this name, and I find that very funny because this card is very similar to another card that has a very hard to pronounce name, Rapids Lurker that thing. It's funny. It's basically a better The difference here is that Queen Tagawa is a Leviathan. Now, because it is one level higher, of course, it is better in the fact that you could actually attack with this card. Rapids Lurker had guard, and so it was basically just a cheaper reusable blocker. Now, if it were up to me, I would say the Worcestershire card is actually better because it's cheaper, and it's better because it's cheaper. Queen Tagawa is more expensive, and you get basically the same thing as Worcestershire, except it's able to attack. If Leviathans become a thing, which I've been saying ever since King Pontius, it would be okay. So because it has a little bit of potential, it's going to be a 1.5, but if you want to use it just for the effect and not for the race, definitely go with Rapids Lurker Worcestershire. And the last card in the Water Civilization for Dragon Strike Infernus is Trial and Error. An awesome card to end off the Water Civilization. It is a common, believe it or not, and it draws you 3, and then you have to discard 1, not just out of those 3, but out of your whole hand. Now, it is level 5, so it's 1 more expensive than cards like Spy Mission and Crystal Memory, but in certain decks, Trial and Error is actually beneficial to you and could be more useful than cards like Spy Mission and Crystal Memory. It really depends on the deck. Now, if your deck is using cards that kind of rely on the graveyard at least a little bit, Trial and Error is definitely something to look into. You could dump spells to bring back with Keeper of Dawn. You could dump level 4 or less to use it with Dracothane of the Abyss or Return from the Beyond. And who knows, maybe later into the game they'll have effects like Return from Beyond, but you'd be able to target almost any creature instead of just level 4 or less. Now, I don't think we'll be getting cards like that for a very, very long time, but if we do, you gotta keep note of this card and Cyber Trader to pitch those big dudes in your discard pile that you can get back with that one card that brings back big cards. So because of all the potential that this card brings and all of its uses, it definitely gets a 4 out of 5. It's definitely a really nice alternative to Spy Mission, and it allows you to customize your deck to your personal needs. So that's it for the Water Civilization. Overall, pretty good, but at the same time, there are a lot of disappointments. Especially Issel. Issel's pretty disappointing. Bottle Wishes has been disappointing at times, but it definitely has potential. But it does have some breakout stars in Dragon of Reflections, and probably the best water card, Nyx. Awesome stuff from the Water Civilization. Hope you enjoyed this review. Thanks for watching. This is TKC, the Kaijudo Channel, signing out. See you later, guys.